So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this, which is the defensive line, right? The most
Okay.
interesting position on this football team. It's the deepest. You've got a bunch of names. You think they're going to keep 10 defensive linemen. We know that. What do you want to see from this position in training camp?
I want to see Drake Jackson show that he is the starter opposite Nick Bosa and that it's not even a competition. That's what I'm really looking for first and foremost. The second thing I'm looking for here is I'm looking for Kalia Davis to really fire and show that he's an NFL defensive tackle and that he needs to play in a rotation. And the third thing I'm looking for here is Spencer Wagy, the undrafted college free agent who looks so impressive in mini camps to grab hold of the job and show that he's a big time player. And those are the guys I'm really looking for. To me, I have this, my 10 are not like everybody else's 10 probably. I have Bosa, Hargrave, Armstead, Drake, Kerry Hyder, Givens, Cleveland Farrell, Austin Bryant, Kalia Davis. That's 9.
So
and I have Spencer Wagy.
Kinlaw gets cut.
So I have Kinlaw cut or traded. I also have T.Y. McGill, who I think is a really good football player, cut or traded. Most likely cut. And personally, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think Robert Beal gets cut. And I think he either winds up on the practice squad if he slides through waivers.
Can we touch on him real quick? Because there was not really any talk about him from camp. And I expected, look, I'm going to be honest, Krug, if there was one player I expected to get buzz, it was him, and it had nothing to do with him on the football field. I thought he would walk out and be this, because when you look at him, and I'll tell you the reason why I thought he would be this imposing physical presence that everybody would be like, hey, did you see Robert Beal? That dude, oh my God, did you see how that dude's built? Like, hey, like that dude looks, I thought it would be like that because when you go watch his film and you see him stand next to all those freak shows on the Georgia defense, he's a freak show in his own right. Now, his play is obviously not freak show play. He's not, Jalen Carter on that defense. But from a physical, just, hey, visually, when I look at him as a football player, he's like rocked up. He looks good. He's got a great body. He's like Corey Lemonier back in the day. You remember how Corey Lemonier used to look?
Yeah,
he had that great body. Yeah, it's a little bit like that. And so I expected people to just say that because it's an easy observation. It pops out at you. And physically he had that. And we didn't seem to have that reaction. Was it something about, did he just look like another guy? Was he unimpressive? Did you not see anything with the overwhelming physical gifts that he has that has you also having him being cut?
Well, here's my thing is I don't go look for players. I let players come look for me. You know what I mean? I mean, as I'm I want them to shine, I want them to stand out to me. I am not going to go hunting down players saying, where's this guy? Where's this guy? I'm going to watch him and decide if he's good. No, I'm going to watch the group and decide who stands out. And the guys who have stood out to me have been Drake Jackson. Definitely has stood out. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm a little worried here. I'm a little worried because this group has not stood out. Drake stands out. We know Bosa's a monster and Hargrave's a monster.
Armstead's a monster.
But as far as Cleveland Farrell looks, Givens, wasn't overwhelming to me. Kerry Hyder, I know what he is. Austin Bryant didn't look incredible to me. I like T.Y. McGill, but he didn't really stand out. Kalia Davis didn't really stand out. Robert Beal didn't really stand out. Darryl Johnson didn't really stand out. Alex Barrett didn't stand out. The two guys that kind of stood out a little bit to me was Marlon Davidson from Auburn, who's, built like a defensive tackle, but he's got movement ability like a defensive end, and Spencer Wagy. Those guys stood out a little bit to me. But once again, there's no pads, and that makes a huge difference for defensive linemen. And the other thing is, I'm not really worried about who I have to cut here. I'm more worried about, do I have enough here? Because they'll be, this is D-line play. there's going to
Let me
be
ask
it.
you
There's
this
going to be
real quick
injuries.
there. Let me cut in here and ask you this
Yeah.
before I give my opinion. If you are this low, that means would you today call Minnesota and say, we got some picks in 2024, all the picks are restored, third and a fifth for Daniil Hunter. Would you call Yannick Ngakoue and be like, hey, Yannick Ngakoue, nobody wants you right now. We're the 49ers. You have a 9-sack season with us like you've had the last 2 years. You're going to get big money next year if you do it on a team that goes deep in the playoffs to the Super Bowl and you're a difference maker. We'll give you excuse me, we'll give you an incentive laden deal. Like, dude, I don't know, with like, actually, I'm not going to get into throwing random numbers with money out there. I'm not going to posture that far. I'm just going to say, would you call up Yannick Ngakoue and find a way to get that deal done with him? Is that something that you feel like it's obviously a conversation? It makes the 49ers better. But to me, the way you're describing this defensive line position is almost as if you feel like it's a necessity. Is that fair?
I don't know that, I'd be looking at everybody who's even viable. So Ngakwe, yes. Justin Houston, yes. Jason
Yes.
Pierre-Paul, yes. I mean, I'd be looking at all the free agents, and then I think I'd be calling Minnesota and in the Commanders and saying, hey, look, if I get to the end of camp and for whatever reason I'm moving off, I don't like what I'm seeing from Trey Lance. Can I get Montez Sweat? Can I get Montez Sweat for Trey Lance in a fifth? Can I get Chase Young for Trey Lance in a fifth? Can I get Daniil Hunter for Trey Lance in a pick? I mean, those are the conversations I'm having because I absolutely feel like they're a defensive end short, and but I'm not really worried about will Beal make it, will Wagy make it, will Davidson make it. I think they're all going to make it right now, just simply from the standpoint of there's going to be injuries, and they only have so much depth. But I just think they need one more significant piece off the edge, and the guy that I would prioritize is Montez Sweat. That guy to me is the true difference maker. Then if you have Drake and Bosa and Sweat, now you're covered. And I think Cleveland Farrell can replace a Menahue. I feel better about where they're at if they could get one more not good player but very good player on their front, and maybe even a tackle. Though I do like Kalia Davis and T.Y. McGill, but I'm trading Javon Kinlaw. Maybe Kinlaw goes to Washington in that deal for Chase Young or Sweat. But I'm looking for Kinlaw to either really show that he's a different player or it's time to go.
Okay. That's interesting. It's funny because everything you described actually contradicts what I was going to say I wanted to see from the defensive line. And it was going to be quite simply this, Larry. I wanted to see them dominate over the course of training camp. I wanted to see this defensive line dominate to the point where the offense can't even move the ball, right? I don't think this person will mind me telling this story, right? Jaquiski Tartt used to play for the 49ers. His first offseason coincided with the year that Aldon Smith got cut by the 49ers. So he was drafted in 2015. Aldon Smith got cut in 2015. He used to tell me that they used to have to sit Aldon Smith down so that the offense could run their plays in practice because he was so disruptive. Yeah. Now, that's an extreme example because Aldon Smith had Hall of Fame, Reggie White type. I don't want to go that far, but those are the type of that was the statistical era he was in his first couple years in the league, right? That was a completely special, spectacular player. But I want the defensive line to feel that dominant, Larry. I want it to feel so dominant where it's like, hey, for the offense to be able to even practice, we have to nerf these guys down. Where it's like Drake Jackson, we're seeing the special ability, right? We know how special Javon Hargrave is, right? I came on your last stream. I don't know how this comment was taken, so I'll say it again. I think he's a flat-out better player than DeForest Buckner. So I think they got an upgrade there. I really do. I think Eric Armstead, I've always thought he's an excellent player. I think he's wildly underrated. And, you know, there's a few other guys here that can make an impact, but we are relying on them to improve, right? Farrell is one. I've seen a lot of people maybe be a little bit higher on Farrell than I am, Larry. Like, I think he can fit the Arden Key, Charles Omenihu role in the sense that he offers inside-outside versatility, but I don't think he's the pass rusher in terms of talent that those two other guys are. I think you and I have talked about this. Farrell's very strong at the point of attack. I wouldn't be shocked if he starts first and second down, right? Paris Harrelson to Drake Jackson, Alden Smith. That's the example I've used in the past where he's good against the run. But Larry, I don't know if you've seen it maybe in mini camp now that he's with Daryl Tapp and Chris Kasarik, but when you turn Cleveland Farrell on, and this goes back to even when he played with Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins in college, like sure he's really strong and he's got a strong bull rush, but he's not a great bender. He doesn't have great bend around the edge. He's not very explosive in terms of pure explosiveness, bend, and then just using their length. I like Omenihu and Arden Key as football players just flat out better. And it's funny to say that because both of those guys were drafted in the middle rounds, and we're talking about a top 5 pick in Cleveland Farrell, but we're not talking about top 5 traits as a pass rusher. So I'm a little bit skeptical of him making a real significant jump on this football team. And so I am kind of with you, but I guess I'm a little bit higher on the overall prospects because I think those 3 guys I just named at the top, we're talking about 3 guys that possibly will be all pros, right, at the end of the year, right? Would you be surprised if I said, hey, the 49ers had 3 all pros on their defensive line? Eric Armstead was second team, and then Hargrave and Bosa were first team. I wouldn't.
No, I mean, the Niner first team D line is going to be very, very good. It's just a matter of they like to keep those guys fresh by playing them in a rotation, and their rotation, I think, is going to be it's gonna be a little, it's not gonna be quite as deep. I like Farrell as a guy who can find the ball. I like Farrell as a guy who can be in a 4D end alignment inside. I think he's strong, and I think he's smart. I think there's going to be some good traits about him, but I'm just a little concerned about, Kinlaw. I'm a little concerned about Beal and just, the overall depth of the D line. I mean, I think they always, on paper, it looks pretty deep. I will say this, I'm going to feel a lot better if Spencer Wagy is exactly the kind of player.
You love Spencer Wagy, don't you?
Yeah, I really do. Because, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's got a lot of the traits that you're looking for in a defensive end. I would not, and he's got big enough body to play tackle. I would not be, to me, one of the things that I would not be shocked by is if Spencer really impresses and winds up playing first and second down in the base opposite Bosa. On the starting defensive line, and they use Drake as more of a situational guy. And so I could see Wagy starting. I really could see.
I have a similar thought, but it doesn't have to do with Wagy. It has to do with the guy you cut. I could see them looking for more size on their defensive line across the board, kicking Armstead back outside on first and second down, putting Kinlaw, Hargrave, Armstead, and Bosa. I'm still holding a little bit of hope out for Javon Kinlaw. Maybe it's the same thing I did last year when I came on your show and said I still believe in Trey Sermon, where I'm believing in the talent of a player that I really liked out of college, and I kind of want to be right on, or I don't want to, take my fate out on them now. And I really liked Javon Kinlaw when he came out of South Carolina. I always say, go back and watch the Alabama game. Like, wow. Go back and watch the Georgia game when he came out. Like, as good as you can play. Go watch the Senior Bowl. Him one-on-one. I think Lloyd Cushenberry was the only, offensive lineman that was drafted in the first 3 rounds that he went against. But he made Lloyd Cushenberry look like they weren't belonging on the same field, right? It's similar to what Debo did the year before that to Rock Ya-Sin in the Senior Bowl when they had one-on-ones and Debo really cooked him off the line of scrimmage. Javon Kinlaw had his way with Lloyd. He had his way with every offensive lineman there until he left because he hurt his knee, which has been the story of his career so far. So I understand what you're saying with Wagy. I think it's a real point, but I actually view it from the standpoint, and maybe it's because I have no perspective on Wagy because I haven't seen him in practice, so I don't have an element of investment the way you do because you're high on his prospects.
Yeah.
But I'm still there riding it with Javon Kinlaw. And I actually really like that outlook for the Niners run game, right? You're always looking to steal a gap back in the run game, fit from too high and stuff like that. You can do a lot of different things with how you fit the run if you have Eric Armstead, a healthy, playing well Javon Kinlaw, a superstar in Javon Hargrave, and a superstar in Nick Bosa as your front four, because those four guys are pretty talented.
I think the Niners are going to get real aggressive here. I think they, with their defensive line, either at tackle or at end. If Kinlaw doesn't look like the player, or if Kalia Davis doesn't look like a player, or if they don't get some surprises here, I would not be shocked if they went outside and used some draft capital in 2024 to add a piece to their defensive line. Just knowing the way they feel about the D line, knowing the way they like to come at you in waves. One guy who I'm looking for as a holdout across the league, this would take a monumental deal to get it done, but is Christian Wilkins in Miami. If there's a lot of talk that he's holding out and that he may not get the money that he wants from Miami. And if the Niners go to camp and they don't like what they have, I could see them making a trade for a guy.
Let me ask you this, Larry, right? Who's their defensive coordinator?
Steve Wilkes.
No, in Miami.
Oh, that's a good question. Let me see.
It's Vic Fangio, right? It's Vic
Fangio.
Yeah, it is Vic Fangio. When Vic Fangio was really good in Chicago and they had the number one defense in the NFL, who did he have up front? He had Akeem Hicks, right?
Yeah.
Who did he have in San Francisco? He had Justin Smith. Who did Brandon Staley have? Same scheme with the Rams. He had, maybe the greatest defensive player ever in Aaron Donald. Who did Jonathan Gannon have last year when they implemented the same scheme? Had a lot of success, right?
Hargrave.
He had everybody. He had Hargrave. He had Fletcher Cox. He had everybody. I say there's no way. I love the idea because I think when we're talking defensive tackles in the NFL, we're getting to the conversation of that guy might actually be better than Hargrave, and I really think highly of Hargrave. He's an absolute stud. The game he had against the Niners last year he was the best player on the field, honestly, in that game. And so I wouldn't be shocked if the Niners would covet to make a move like that. But I say there's no way Miami moves Christian Wilkins. He's too important. He's the guy that makes everything.
No, you're probably right. And I haven't done the deep dive on exactly who's going to be available and not available. And this guy's going to cost. If you can trade for him, but you're still going to have to pay him $10 million. And they're hugged up against the cap, and it probably doesn't fit. But knowing how the Niners feel about defensive line play, I just wouldn't. I think they'll be, if there's a dramatic addition to be made, to me, it's going to be made on the defensive line, probably at end, but it could be inside. If they get to camp and their backups inside don't look very good. Kinlaw doesn't look great. Kalia Davis doesn't look great. They're not quite as deep, and they really value depth. We'll see. But I definitely think defensive end is the spot that I could easily see them using some of their draft capital to acquire another player.